Okay, good morning. So where we were yesterday was, and the day before, just to review, we had discussed Mishnah on that base told us about the three-way machlokes as it relates to when you are able to say Kriyash Shema Shel Arvis until either able to say it until Mishasha Kaim Chasim which you must, and you're able to say it until Chatzos, or you're able to say it until Shachar, until Alais. Those are the three different opinions that we had as to when you're able to say Kriyash Shema. And then we learned as well the notion that Gamil says that even according to Chacham and say until Chatzos, you really fundamentally have until Alais, but to make siyagim, to make gedarim, to make sure that people wouldn't come to miss the miss of Shema, they made a siyag, as well as with other things that we find Chacham made various siyagim. And then yesterday we discussed in relation to the various shittas that we had about the time that one can say Shema until. We ended up with 6 different shittas as to how long one can say Shema until. It wasn't merely, we ended up with 6 different shittas as to how long when a person may start saying Shema in the evening. We had said in the Mishnah, and we end up with 6 different shittas. How different these shittas are, I'm not 1,000% clear on, but effectively as follows: we have Misha Shakana and that's one shita. We have the shita Misha Shabnei Adam are coming in to eat when they're eating on a regular day. When they're coming to eat on Erev Shabbos, from the time when the ani is coming to eat his pita b'melech on a regular day. We also have the shita of the kahanim being tovel. We have the shita as well of when people are coming to make kiddush, and we have the shita of when most people are coming to be masiv when they're doing haseba on potentially Friday night or maybe on a regular night. I'm not 100% clear from Rashi. So 6 different shitas, and some of the shitas are mentioned with the same names. So, for example, we have Rebbe Lezer in our Mishnah, which could have been understood as Rebbe Lezer not saying from when you can say Shema, but maybe Rebbe Lezer saying until when you can say Shema. But one of the understandings of Rebbe Lezer in the Gemara is that there's maybe a contradiction. Rebbe Lezer on the one hand says that the time you're able to say Shema is from when the evening sets in, from Tzeis, and which the sign of that is Kahanim Nechnas Melach Shemasan. And then we have another sheet from Lezer who says that from the time you make Kiddush on Erev Shabbos, which seems to be a contradiction. On one hand, we have Rameir. Rameir says that Mishash Shebnei Adam Nechnasim Lachal Bitam B'Arish Shabbasis. On the other hand, he says Kahanim Tovel. Which one is it? Maybe Treitan Ali B'Rameir, Treitan Ali Lezer. These are different ways to explain it. But effectively, we end up with 3 different shitas as to when you can say Shema until at night, and 6 different shitas from when you can start saying Shema at night. That is the basic summary of the Gemara until now. And now for today, we have for much of Brachos, we have an relatively easy Agadah to Gemara that has, by the by, a few different halachic points as well. Says the Gemara, Ad Sefer Hashmura Harishayna, right? The first thing that we had learned in the Mishnah was the opinion of Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Lezer said that a person is able to say Shema at night until the end of the first Hashmira. So the Gemara asks, "My kasav Rabbi Eliezer, what does Rebbe Lezer hold? What is Rebbe Lezer teaching us? Iksav shalish mishmaris havi alayla." If Rebbe Lezer holds that there are 3 watches at night, and what exactly is a watch? What exactly happens at night? So Rashi tells us in Chumash. Rashi tells us in Chumash in Parshas B'Shalach, on the pasuk says, "Vayiba Ashmeres HaBoker." Right? If you remember, the Egyptians had come to attack the Jewish people. The Jewish people are stuck between the river and the sea. No, the Jewish people are stuck. That was a joke. Sorry, maybe too early. The Jewish people are stuck between the rock and the hard place. They have on the one hand a desert behind them, right? They have an ocean on next to them, and they have the Egyptians coming after them. They have no real options. What are they going to do? They're in a dangerous spot. So what ends up happening? What ends up happening is that the Jewish people, they get a special saving from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Hashem tells them, why are you? don't worry about it. You'll be fine. I'm going to take care of it, right? And Hashem takes care of the Egyptians. The Torah tells us, they of course are all destroyed in the sea. So the pasuk tells us that it was the Ashmeres of the morning. Or Chaim Hakadosh talks about what does it mean Ashmeres habayker. Why wasn't it a different Ashmer? We're not going to be able to get into that now. But for our purposes now, Rashi tells us there in Chumash that there are three Ashmeres, as we will see in the Gemara here. Rashi says not that often. Rashi says, and I say. What does Rashi say that he says? It's because the night is divided up into various portions. Shir shel malachi ashar, it's kat achar kat. The mishmeres in the night are divided up into three. Each set of angels gets their chance to be able to say their shira. That's why this is called an ashmer. This is the position of Rashi. Rashi is telling you that you should know that there are three mishmaras at night, and each kat of the malachim says their shira at that time. So again, says the Gemara back on Gimel. If he holds that there are in fact three mishmaris at night, so then assuming we're dealing with a 12-hour night, a 12-hour day, right? The person is going to be able to divide the night easily. How? Even if math wasn't your forte or fort, depending on how you pronounce it, nevertheless, you'll be able to manage to figure out that if the night is 12 hours and there are three Hashmars, that it's only 4 hours. So just say until the 4th hour. Why do you have to start talking about Hashmeres? It's get very confusing, says the Gemara. Peaks of our Mishmaras have allowed. If you hold that there are 4 Mishmaras and nights, again, you can do the math. It's relatively easy. So said that there are 4 Mishmaras, so each Mishmar is 3 hours. So say until the 3rd hour. What I have to tell you until the end of the first Mishmar. What is the Chiddush Rabbi Lezer is trying to teach us? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer holds that there are 3 Mishmaras a night. And he's telling you the Ika Mishmaris Barakia, the Ika Mishmaris Ba'ara. There are Mishmaris that are celestial, heavenly Mishmaris, and there are Mishmaris here on earth. There are earthly Mishmaris. And you can tell, and Rabbi Lezer is telling you that I don't merely have to tell you the time when you're able to say Shema until. I could tell you that you're able to say in Shema until a certain Mishmar, and you will know. Even if you don't have a watch, you're going to know. How are you going to know? Because there is an actual sign that says, not printed, but there will be a sign that we will see that you will be able to tell when the time is of the evening. Says the Gemara, we have a price at the time of Blazer. I'm Shalosh Mishmaras have a Lailot. Rabbi Lezer holds that there are 3 Mishmaras at night. I call Mishmar, Kodesh Baruch Hu V'Shoy carry on each and every Mishmar. Kodesh Baruch Hu was sitting, as it were. Again, this is what's called anthropomorphic language. The Rebbe Shalom doesn't sit, and he doesn't do the next things that we will say either. But these are the Saber So'ezin. These are things that we use in order to be able to explain things, because otherwise we cannot be able to talk about anything, right, in relation to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So we use this kind of lotion. The Rebbeinu Shalom is, as it were, kaviyachol, with all el alamino alfi avdalos of qualifications, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is, as it were, sitting in each and every one of these mishmars, and he's roaring like a lion. Shenemar, the pasuk tells us in Yirmiyah, this is in relation to the destruction of the first bias. The Jewish people have not behaved. Yirmiyah says, I've been screaming at you for 25 years, and you haven't been listening. And now you're going to get your punishment. The come up, it's going to happen. All the nations are going to come and destroy you, and you're going to be in exile for 7 years. And don't you worry. I'm saying I'm going to get those Babylonians. In the end, they're all going to get their just desserts. Says the pasuk, Hashem imar mishag u'ma'in kodesh yitain koilo shoyeg shishag al naveil. Hashem mimara mishag, Hashem from His place, right, from the celestial abode, He is roaring. U'ma'in kodesh, from His holy place, yitain koilo, is putting out His voice. Shoyeg yishag al naveil, He is roaring on His abode, right, that has been destroyed. The similar, and before we get to the similar, though, I'll just mention. Rashi points out that, of course, count the pasuk. How many times did it say shayg in the pasuk? 3 times, right? Even though it says yitain koil, that's not the word shayg. So you see 3 mishmaris, 3 different roars. The similar davar. What's the sign for this? Mishmar shenach amar ner. The first mishmar is the donkey's braying, shnia klov and sekim. The second is that the dogs bark, and the Shlisha says, Tina Gyanik Mishtehimai, the child starts to nurse, or Vishim Saperson Baila, or a woman is starting to schmooze with her husband. Notice, I'll point out cute, is that the Gemara says, Vishim Saperson Baila, the woman is talking to her husband. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says it just a little bit differently. Rashi says, "V'ishim is a person baila kvar gia karv liyayim." It's already almost a day. B'nei adam esayrim mishnah. Some people are starting to get up from their sleeping. V'asheichem yachad, and those that were sleeping in the same room, misaprim zeh im zeh. They are talking to each other. So Rashi is not saying it's the woman talking to her husband. Rashi is saying the people are talking to each other. No, as it is. Nevertheless, what we see from this Gemara is that there are what? 3 mishmarais that are in the evening, according to Rabbi Lezer. And Rabbi Lezer is teaching you that you have until the end of 4 hours in the night. So if you have from 6 o'clock, let's say that there's a 12-hour day. So you have from 6 until 10, that's when you can say the Shema. At the end of the first Mishmar, now you are no longer able to say Shema. You're done according to Rabbi Lezer, because remember there's machlokes from Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Gamliel, the Chachamim, about what does it mean b'shachva? Is b'shachva a situation that you're saying Shema at night from when you go to sleep, or is it b'shachva like Chachamim say that you say Shema so long, kol zman shchiva, that as long as people are sleeping, you're able to say Shema. According to Rabbi Lezer, you're only able to say Shema from the time that people are going to sleep. When do people go to sleep? From when it starts to get to the evening until the end of the first Mishmar. People are going to bed during that time. That's when you're allowed to say Shema, according to Rabbi Lezer. So for Rabbi Lezer, once that time period is finished, it's over. You're not able to say the Shema anymore. But Lezer didn't say that the reason you're able to say Shema until the end of 4 hours is because he wanted to let you know that even if you didn't know that it was 4 hours, you would still nevertheless know. How would you know? Because you would hear the chamar ner, you would hear the donkey's braying. You have a second simon as well for the middle mishmar. That is the klavim tzeakim. The dogs are barking, and you have the simon for the third mishmar. Is the children are nursing, and the couples are talking. Fine. This is the Gemara thus far. Says the Gemara, Mike, what does Rabbi Lezer hold? Does Rabbi Lezer hold that it's the beginning of each mishmar? That is the sign of when these things are happening. In other words, is it at the beginning of the mishmar that the dogs are barking and the donkeys are braying? So says the Gemara, then why do you need to have a simon for the first mishmar? The first mishmar, the way you know is not from the fact that the donkeys are braying. The way you know that it's the first time of the first mishmar is what? Urtahu, the fact that it's evening. Says the Gemara, if you say that the sign of the Mishmar happens at the end of the Mishmar, so then why do I need a sign? Why do I need a sign for the last Mishmar to tell you that the children are nursing or the couples are talking? Simani Yamami, I have a regular sign, the fact that it's the daytime. So therefore, the Gemara has to answer, when is it this special sign that Rabbi Lezer was telling you that even if you don't know, you have a watch, you will nevertheless know what time of the night it is? So Rabbi Lezer holds that the sign of the donkey's braying, which is the first mishmar, is at the end of the first mishmar, meaning when it's coming now to the end of the 4 hours. And his sign in relation to the second mishmar is the middle of the mishmar. When do the dogs bark? The dogs are barking when they're let out. Who let the dogs out is in the middle of the mishmar. I'm not getting enough smiles. And then the last mishmar is in relation to the morning. The end of that mishmar is when that sign is, and that is the time of the day. So this is the beginning of the last mishmar is when the children start to nurse, when the couples start to talk. That is therefore needed. Then you can't use the sign of the evening because it's at the end of the first mishmar. You can't use the sign of the morning because it's at the beginning of the last mishmar, and it's the middle of the middle mishmar, and when the dogs are barking. This then would explain why Rabbi Lezer is telling you his vart, not just simply as a matter of time, but rather giving it to you in the idea of the mishmar, because in theory you could use the time of the mishmar not just if you have a watch, but even if you didn't have a watch, you'll be able to know when is the mishmar is happening. Good. It continues the Gemara. So the Gemara then says, the Vibayis Ema. And I can give you another answer to explain when the mishmars are happening. So kul safe mishmar, you could say that they all happen at the end. Vibayis Ema kul safe mishmar is kachashiv. And you're going to ask me then if it's all at the end of each mishmar. So I understand why you can't say simana or two for the first mishmar that say that the donkeys are braying at the beginning, because they're not. They're braying at the end of the first mishmar, which means then that you don't have a simon from the fact that it's evening. When does the simon? The simon is from the fact that the donkeys are braying, and that's going to tell you that it's the end of the first mishmar. That's going to tell you the time that you're no longer able to say Shema for Arvis according to Belezer. Fine, but I'm going to have a kasha then. If we're saying it's the end of the first mishmar and the end of the second mishmar when the donkeys are, when the dogs are barking, that's not relevant for us for now. But the third mishmar, which is saying that the end of the mishmar is when the children are nursing and when the couples are schmoozing. So then I'm going to ask you a question. The question is Pashut. Why do I need to have a sign for the last mishmar? The children are nursing. It's already the daytime. I don't need a sign that the children are nursing, the couples are talking. I see it's a day. Says the Gemara, then when you're going to say to me, you don't need a simon for the last mishmar because it's the daytime. So what is it going to be there for to have such a simon? To tell you when you're able to say Shema for somebody who's living in a dark room. He's living in a dark room. He doesn't know when the Shema time is. Why doesn't he know? Because it's dark. He's living in a very dark room. So once he sees Emas Kevan, once he has the sign of a couple talking or the baby nursing, so then he knows it's time for Shema. Right? So again, you might ask, and I don't have an answer to the question, but isn't this like a machlekes and mitzias? Like, I mean, when is the mishmar? Is the sign of the mishmar happening at the beginning of the mishmar, the middle of the mishmar, the end of the mishmar? And the Gemara is giving you two answers. One answer is telling you that, oh, it's the end of the first mishmar, the middle of the second mishmar, and the beginning of the third mishmar. And the second answer is telling you, well, it's at the end of each mishmar. Well, which one is it? I don't have an answer to the question. I don't know what the Metzias is of what they do in the heavenly abodes. If somebody does know, please edify and let me know when exactly it is. But either way, what we're coming out then is an explanation for why Rabbi Lezer used the lashon of Ad Seif Hashmar Rishayna and didn't say Ad Seif Daled Shoes. The reason is because either the first teretz or the second teretz, when it comes to the first mishmar, the sign is only at the end of the first mishmar. The donkeys are praying at the end of the first mishmar. So therefore, if a person's not going to have the watch, he doesn't know when it's the end of the 4 hours, he's nevertheless going to know when he's no longer able to say Kriya Shema Konchim Belezer because he hears the donkeys braying. Good? Fine. Tais asks Kasha. Tais says we're going to learn later on a Mishnah that tells Machlekes. But when you're able to say Shema in the morning, there's going to be machlekes between Misha Yaakov and Tchelas Alavim and Tchelas Lakarti. This is Tais Laman going to be Veisafel. So Tais asks, according to Rabbi Lezer, when is it that you're able to say Shema until Misha Yaakov and Tchelas Lakarti, right? Which is a later Zman than Tchelas Alavim. Tchelas Alavim, to see the difference between blue and white, is not to be Tzioni. Okay, bad joke. But the difference between Tchelas Lakarti is a later time. Right, to be able to tell the difference between blue and green is going to have to be a later Zman. So, if according to Belezer, you can only say Shema in the morning. When you're able to tell the difference between Tchelas Lakarti, so how could he say that you say Shema when you're hearing the kids nursing or the couples talking? What's going on? You know you need between Tchelas Lakarti. If a person's living in a dark room, how could he say Shema? He can't be Mashiach. Is Mashiach required? If somebody doesn't have a watch. So, and he's living in a dark room, and he's not able to be Yaakov between Tchelas Lakartis. How can he say Shema? And his thesis, no. This is basically the way it works like this, according to Rabbi Lezer. When the kid is crying, or nursing, whatever, when the couple's talking, so then you know, this is going to be the time. It's Amud HaShachar now. It's the end of the last Mishmar. Now it's Amud HaShachar. So now you get up. By the time you get up and you're prepared, so then it's going to already be Misha Yaakov. Even if you're in a dark room, you can rely on that to know that you could say the Shema. This is explaining Shiddur Rabbi Lezer. Good. So this is the first part of the Gemara, which comes to edify and to explain to us, according to Rabbi Lezer, why he used a bit of an odd lashon to tell us a time slide. He should have just said Seif Arba Shoes. He didn't, because he was telling us another vart, and this additional vart is the idea that there are 3 mishmaros at night, and on each Mishmar, Kadosh Baruch Hu should carry, and about the Klal Yisrael, about the Beis Hamikdash, that it is unfortunately destroyed. Continues the Gemara, and we are now at the dot. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel. Yeah, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel, Mishmei de Rab. Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel says the name of Rab. Gimel Mishmaris Have Alayla. There are 3 Mishmaris at night. Kol Mishmar Mishmar Yesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shei Kari. And on each Mishmar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shei Kari. And he's saying the following: V'omer Oy lebanim sheva v'neseim echaravti es beisi. Woe is it unto my children that because of their sins I have destroyed my temple, v'sarafti seicholi, I have destroyed my heichal, v'eglisam l'veimumay sa'ilam, and I have exiled them to the various nations, the diaspora. Yes, look at the beginning of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, the first simon in Shulchan Aruch and Aruch Chaim. What does Shulchan Aruch tell us? It tells a variety of things, right? One of the things he says is that we should get up in the morning, kari, right? Fine. And then he starts telling us, before he tells us about the Indian of saying the Parsak, Kedan, Kutcha, and the various different things that we say in the morning about the Kiyar and the Kteris, and why did we say all of that? So again, we're going to see later on the 4th paragraph, but tefillas could be, because of the Avos Tikkum, but also could be because of the Karbanis. We don't have the Karbanis anymore. We don't have the Beis Hamikdash anymore. So we say some things in order to be able to, as it were, be mamala our with our mouths what we can no longer do with our actions. So we say over these parashas that even though we no longer can do them. But one of the things that Shulchan Aruch writes right before he talks about this is he says the idea that there are these 3 mishmaros at night, and in each mishmar, Kadosh Baruch Hu is, as it were, Shei Kari, and there are certainly a time of rachamim that a person should be focusing on. This, of course, it becomes the idea of taking chatzos, that I'm not saying that it's a requirement to say, certainly not, but there are those who, the Chilei Skula, who do get up at night to do this because of this Gemara, because of these Mishmaris, Havei Laila, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been Shei Kari, because it's the Zman of Rachamim, to be able to try to take advantage of that, to be, as it were, crying with the Rebbeinu Shalom for the situation of the Beis HaMikdash, for the situation of the Jewish people. Okay, so now the Gemara continues, and the Gemara says the following. Tanya, Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yosi says that once he was walking on the road, and I went to the Churva, right? We know when we come to Yerushalayim, there was the Churva Shul, right? But Yerushalayim was once full of many Churvas. Today, Baruch Hashem, it's not, you won't see that anymore. This opens up a wider question and about the tefillah of Nachem on Tisha B'Av that some people didn't want to say it. Because how can you say, it's not true, right? This is a wider question I can't get into now, and the different approaches that people had. Some people wanted to attack in the tefillah, some people didn't want to say it, some people say it exactly as is. The ones who say it exactly as is because of the fact that they say without the temple, without the Beis HaMikdash, Altila, then all of it is like considered a Ir Hashemim. Others want to say, okay, make an edit instead of saying the ear, say the Ir Atika, right? The Makom HaMikdash. That's still Bezuya. Shemema, believe it or not, that area is still terrible. Fine. Those who want to say it like that. And then there are those that you shouldn't say it. Shouldn't say it. We still don't have a Beis HaMikdash. We're not. It's not a Messianic era. So those are not really accepted as part of the halachic equation. Nevertheless, we continue, and the Gemara tells us that at that time there were tons of churvas. Rabbi Yosi said he once stopped at one of these churvas in Yerushalayim, l'spalel, in order to daven. Elio came, he's Zachor Latayv. Who is the one person who's known as Zachor Latayv in Tanakh? No? Huh? Elio, Shkar, but I'm saying in Tanakh, where does it say, who's Zachor Latayv in Tanakh? Come on, it's a song. V'gam. Yeah, Charvaina Zachor Latayv. He's the one person Zachor Latayv. There are, in fact, those commentaries are not going to say that they are correct. As a matter of fact, they are not. But there are those that would like to suggest that maybe Charvaina is Elio, because Elio is Zachor Latayv. Maybe it's the reverse. No, okay, we're not getting into that now. But all we'll say is that Zachor Latayv is specifically used by Elio. Right? We say Arachaman right? When you say Eliyahu Zachul HaTov, Yivasa Blonim B'Severes Teves. That Eliyahu, why he's Zachul HaTov, is a big topic. Eliyahu Zu Pinchas, can't explore more than that now, but just understand that the Gemara is putting it just a short lashon. Eliyahu Zachul HaTov, he is remembered for the good. Eliyahu is the Tishbi, he's the one who's going to be coming, hopefully soon, to Mimavasa the Geula. Says the Gemara. So Rabbi Yossi was walking, and on the way, he stopped off at a churban from Yerushalayim to daven, and guess who was there? Eliyahu, v'shamali ala Pesach, and he was waiting for me at the door. As Rashi points out, if you look at the Rashi v'shamar, what does v'shamar mean? Says Rashi v'hint, and he was waiting for me. Rashi then says, right, the pasuk in Parshas Vayeshev, right? If you recall that pasuk, what happened? Yosef had a bunch of dreams, right? And the brothers are very upset. They didn't like him. They were very jealous of him. And what happened when they were so jealous of him? Right? Eventually, they sold him, and we know the whole story. But before that, when he was telling over the dreams to his brothers, and they're getting very upset at him, what did the pasuk say about it? V'aviv shamaras hadavar. Right? Even though the pasuk told us that Yaakov Avinu was vayigar by Aviv, vayomer loy. Do you really think that I'm going to come along with your mother and the family to all bow to you? What kind of absurdity is that? Nevertheless, Yaakov took the dream seriously. Why did Yaakov take the dream seriously? Because he was a dreamer, and his dreams had come true. He took his son's dreams seriously as well. Says the Gemara, so Eliyahu Hanavi is waiting for me at the door until I finish my prayers. After I finish davening, after davening, he said to me, "Oh, Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi." And I said back to him, "Shalom Aleichem, my teacher and my master." Now, why didn't he say Shalom Aleichem to Eliyahu Navi first? Why does Eliyahu Navi have to say hello to him first? Says the Chidah, because he just finished davening. He was like, "Oh, he said Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleinu," right? And he's finished, and what happens? Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi. He didn't have a chance. He didn't have a moment. But of course, he would have said Shalom Aleichem to Eliyahu Navi. You don't wait for Eliyahu Navi to come say Shalom Aleichem to you. And as to the weird lashon, right? Why is Eliyahu saying to him Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi? He's saying to him Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Amar. Pasha. Rabbi Yossi is not his Rebbe in that sense, but he's the Rebbe. He's a master. It's an honorific to give to him. But of course, Eliyahu Navi, relative to Rabbi Yossi, he's getting a bigger honorific. He's saying to him Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Umari. So he says to him, he says, why did you come daven in this room? I came to daven. So he says, so why don't you daven on the road? He says, I was afraid that maybe I would be interrupted by people. Rabbi Yossi is a known commodity. He's a big Tana. People might interrupt him and want to ask him questions, won't be able to daven. So he said, you should have davened the short tefillah. It happens to be a machlekes here between Rashi and Tosfos. What is, or I should say, the machlekes is between the beginning of Tosfos and Rashi. So Rashi says, what is the tefillah ketzara? Look at Rashi, Havinenu. Rashi says that the tefillah ketzara is the tefillah of Havinenu. Tosfos in the Tosfos of Harlo, Spal tefillah ketzara, Tosfos the machlekes with Rashi at the first half of Tosfos. And the end Tosfos agrees with Rashi. So in the first part of Tosfos says he disagrees. He says it's not Havinenu. It's not like what Rashi says. And there's some other tefillah called the tefillah ketzara. And what is that tefillah ketzara? We'll learn later on. The Gemara is going to tell us that tefillah is tzarche amcha merubim. So the problem is v'gam al zeh kasha. Tosfos in the middle of the Tosfos says, but that's also not so simple. The kaman amin she'ein lemon tefillah shel tzarche amcha el makom sakana. So he says, we're not supposed to say this tefillah ketzara of tzarche amcha merubim except when you're in a makom sakana. And was this a makom sakana? Says Tosfos, no, this was not a makom sakana. Why not? Because look at the Gemara said, why did Rabbi Yossi say you came to daven in the churva? Not because of sakana. He came to daven in the churva because he was afraid of being mafsik. People are going to bug him with questions. So he doesn't have a head to say that merubim tzarche amcha because he's not there for a sakana. He's davening it because he's being afraid of being mafsik. So therefore, since he wasn't afraid of listing, he was afraid of people going to bug him with questions. So therefore, he said, concludes that Rashi is correct, then it must be tefillas havinenu. If it's tefillas havinenu, then why are we calling it a tefillah ketzar? We should say havinenu. So that Tosfos ends up with a new answer And Tosfos' new answer is that over here, Tefillah Ketzara means having Nenu, and later on, when we say Tefillah Ketzara, it's going to be this other Tefillah of Mum Tzarchei Amcha. So there's going to be two different types of Tefillah Ketzaras. Fine. Either way, what we end up is the following. Eliyahu Navi asking Rabbi Yossi, why'd you come daven in this room? And he's telling him, I came to daven in the room. I'm sorry, he asked him, why'd you enter the room? He said, I came here to daven. He said, so why don't you daven on the road? He says, I was afraid of people bugging me with shilas. So he said, okay, so I understand, but why did you daven such a long Shemona Esrei? You should have davened a Tefillah Ketzara. Our Tefillah Ketzara understanding is right now, according to Rashi and the end of the Siyum of Tosfos, is they should have said Avinenu. Avinenu, we're going to see later on. It's a short Tefillah. Basically, what it does is it synopsizes the whole Shemona Esrei into one little concise paragraph. So if it's basically trying to making the Shemona Esrei short, so you should have said a short davening. Why did you say a long one? Now you might say, well, what's the problem? What's wrong with the long davening? What's the issue? The following. Says Rabbi Yossi, so at that time, I learned at that time three things. What are the three things that I learned from him? I learned that you don't go into a room. And I learned that you're able to daven on the road, right? You're allowed to say Shema there, but I learned you're allowed to daven Shemana Esrei on the road. And that somebody who's davening on the road should say Tefillah Ketzara, which again we're explaining is the Tefillah of Havinenu. This is the three halachas that Rabbi Yossi learned from Eliyahu Navi at that time. And then and you might be wondering, so why is this Gemara here? Why are we talking what is the connection of this Gemara to anything we just said? The connection is now. What did you hear in this churva? What noise did you hear in this room? Right? The assumption is that there was a noise in the churva. The assumption is that Rabbi Yossi would hear. He's on such a level that he would hear this. He would discern this curl. So what did Rabbi Yossi in fact says? Yes, I did hear a curl. And what did you hear? So he says something like this: I heard a bas curl, not a ben curl, a bas curl. What is a bas curl? Not for now. We don't have the time. It's not an actual voice. It's the daughter of a voice. We have to explain, and other times we'll go into more detail. It was cooing like a dove. Right? I heard this voice that was saying, "Oy, that my children they have sinned, and I had to destroy the temple and burn down the Beis Hamikdash and exile them." And this, of course, is what we said about the Ari Shei Karid, what HaKadosh Baruch was saying, and that's why this Gemara was brought in. He says, by your life, you should know, you should know that Rebbe Hashem doesn't just simply say this now when you're in the chorva. Hashem is saying it 3 times a day. This is not only when Hashem says it 3 times a day. Not only that, when the Jews come in to the Bate Knesses, the Bate Midrash, as the Maharsha writes, and they say, "Hey, Shmei Rabbah." Now we should just point out that what do you mean the basic Knesset, the basic Medrash? There's 2 different places to daven. Later on in the brachos, we're going to see that some people prefer to daven in the basic Medrash, not in the basic Knesset. What is the main difference between basic Knesset and basic Medrash? And the difference is between the sanctity. A shul has very specific laws. You cannot eat in a shul. You cannot sleep in a shul. You can't do a lot of things in shul. So most shuls today are all being mekudesh as the basic Medrash. So you're able to do all those things. Not, of course, nobody sleeps in a shul, but some people eat in a shul, they have a kiddush, etc., like that. Okay. Continues the Gemara. And the Gemara says that when the Jewish people say Yehei Shmei Rabbah, what has HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu Menanei Rosh. Hashem has the word nods his head. Praise be the King. That the lucky is the King. Praise is the King that his people are giving him such honors, that are saying such beautiful things about him. Nebuch, though, that the father had to exile his children, and his children had to go into exile away from the table of their father. That is to say, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying this, number 1, at the Mishmars, number 2, in the Chorva, at least the Chorva of Yossi was, and number 3, when we say Yehei Shmei Rabbah. When we say Yehei Shmei Rabbah, we get this kind of response from the Ben Shalom as well. We have to point out, can't go without this, knowing that Tosfos points out it's a machlekes. When Tosfos with the Machzavitri, Tosfos says the Machzavitri is wrong. The Machzavitri says that the way you should look at Yehei Shmei Rabbah, think about it, we don't have the time to go through the Tosfos inside, but Yehei Shemei, the Machzavitri says, is 2 things. Look at the word Shmei. Shmei is Shin Mem, so the way he wants to understand it is Yehei Shem Ka Rabbah. The name of God should be great, And then he understands it additionally, where number one, that the name of God should be great, and should be forever and ever. That is the sheet of the Maksavitchi. We're asking for two things, right? Like we just quoted already before, Paris B'Shalach. Look at the end of Paris B'Shalach by the Mechama with Amalek. The pasuk says, "Yodal Kes Yom Mechama Hashem Amalek." Midar Dar, right? And the name of God is not going to be fully, as it were, whole until the Amalek is destroyed. So the Maksavitch is saying, as it were, asking for two things, or we're saying two things that we want. Number one, that the name of God should be great, and two, that it should be blessed forever and ever. Says no, Maksavitch is not correct. It's all one tefillah. It's one tefillah that the name of God, which is great, should be forever and ever and ever. Right? That is the way Tosfos wants to understand, not like the Maksavitch. That's number one. Number two, Tosfos talks about the evolution of a Yesh Mei Rabbah. How did it become like this? So you have an option to say it. The way Tosfos understands it is that they used to say it after the drasha, at the end of the Gemara Saita. They used to say it at the end of the drasha. They would say, like, I don't know if they said that part, but they said Kaddish after they had a shear, and there are many Amoratim at the shear. And they wouldn't understand in Hebrew, so that's why they said it in their version of English, which was Aramaic. So, continues the Gemara. We have a couple more minutes. Let's just finish. A person is not able to go into a churva for three reasons. What are the three reasons? Because of chshad, maybe somebody thinks they're doing some inappropriate activities. We have to go into the massive halachic topic of not doing things because of being chaysh with somebody, and that is certainly in certain situations mandates certain behavior or non-behavior. Because of the fact that it might fall, you may get hurt, or because of mazikin. We already mentioned I did mazikin, shedim, kufyudim, sachim. We're not getting more into that right now. Nechshad. What is the issue of chshad going into a chorva? But typically, why do I need to have three reasons that you shouldn't go into a chorva because of chshad, mapelas, and mazikin? Just say because of chshad. But maybe why do you have to say it's chshad? Maybe say it's just mapelas. That's the only reason. There's the Gemara B'Charati. We're talking about a situation where it was a chorva charati. So if it's a chorva charati, the part of it fell down, but the rest of it's going to be standing because it's new. So if it's new, so you're not worried about being mapelas. So what are you going to be worried about? Only about chshad. So says the Gemara, why are you worried about chshad? What about the mazikin? Mazikin says Gemara, no, betray. We're talking about a situation of a chorva charati with two people, but then you have two people. You're not worried about mazikin. Says the Gemara, betray. If you have two people, so then you shouldn't have chshad either. We know the Gemara tells in the Kedushin that a situation where a woman is able to be with two ksherim. Says the Gemara, no. We're dealing with betrayal priesthood. We're dealing with two people who are prutzim. So if they're prutzim in a chorva charati, right? So you're not worried about mapas because you have it's a new place. You're not worried about mazikin because it's two people, but you are worried about chshad because they're two prutzim. So you said you need to be not to go into a chorva because of the fact that it might fall down. But mazikin. Why do you have to have mapilas? Just say it's because of chshad and mazikin. It's more of cherver kasher. It's about two people who are ksherim. So again, in a situation you have two people who are ksherim. So you're not going to be worried about chshad because they're ksherim. You're not going to be worried about mazikin because you have two, but you still be worried about mapilas. So therefore, we have to have mapelas. And then mazikin, why do you have to word mazikin? Just say it's the other ones. You don't need to have mazikin. Says we're dealing with a chorva charati, but we're dealing with a chorva charati that is a new chorva, and then the two people that are ksherim. So there are two people that are ksherim. So then, what do you not have? You do not have chshad because they're ksherim. You do not have mapelas because it's a charati, but you still have. Says the Gemara. You still have what? What are you worried about? You don't have chshad. You don't have mapelas. And you're not going to have mapilos, you're not going to have chshad, and you're not going to have mazikin. So what are you worried about then? Says the more you betray mazikin nami like this. You don't have mazikin either. Says the more this is a place where it's known maybe for mazikin, so you can still have mazikin. Or you buy same. We're talking about a situation where it was one person and he's in a churva charati. So if it's the one person with churva charati, the korbet davar that's in a field. The hasam mishum chshad lucky, not an issue of chshad. Why? Because it's a situation of a field. The isha b'davra, the woman's not going to go into the middle of a field. So if you have one churva charati in a davra, so you're not worried about chshad because the woman's not going to go into a field. She's scared. She's not worried about mapelas because of charati, but you would still be worried about mazikin or mishum mazikin igad. You would have nevertheless because of mazikin. So just to finish, to give a quick thought on the parsha, look in the pasuk. Pasuk tells us that Avram hated Avram gets all these incredible things from the from Parai as a result of what he did, what Rebbeinu did to protect Sarah against him. The Parai gave all these things that to Avram Avinu in order to be able to get Avram to agree to let him marry Sarah. And the end of the pasuk says that Avram Avinu is Avram kaved ma'od ba'mikneh ba'kesef v'azov. What do you mean? What we just said that in order for Avram to get online to let Sarah marry him, Sarah gave him all these incredible things. So what happened to the tzayin of bakav abad v'chamar? What it tells you is that there was a market. Avram needed to be liquid. He can't travel, all those things. So what did he do? He took all of those avadim and chamarim and the shvakas and all that, and he sold it. And therefore he had a lot of gold and silver. Have a wonderful day.